Alrighty, and we're here. I'm here with my guest today is Marc Logarta. He kindly, has, I guess, volunteered himself.
Yeah.
In a way. And actually, first thing I should say is a bit of a thank you because my son was being a little bit difficult tonight. And so we were meant to probably start about 40 minutes ago. And I had to, spend half an hour trying to resettle him and get him back to sleep, the joys of parenthood.
Absolutely.
But Marc, why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Well, first of all, Johnny, I wanted to thank you for having me here. This is the first time I've done anything like this, but even that 40-minute delay, that was perfectly fine. You helped me get my Christmas shopping done. Got my wife's present out of the way, bought 2 lemonade trees.
Yep.
That's probably too much information, but
No, that's okay.
about myself. So I was born in Manila.
Yep.
Raised in New Jersey.
Yep.
And California. And I've moved to Sydney now.
Yep.
And I've been here for about 10 years.
10 years.
Yes.
So, born in New Jersey.
No. Born in Manila.
Oh, sorry, born in Manila. Moved to New Jersey
at about 7 years old. So basically raised in the States.
Okay.
I'm basically a Jersey kid at heart.
And any idea what was the rationale for your parents to?
Oh, no. So my parents split up actually when I was 7.
Oh, when you were 7.
So when I was 7, my parents split up. And my mother took me to New Jersey.
Yep.
You know, as many people from the Philippines do. And it's a bigger, better life in the States.
Yep.
And raised there until I was about 16.
Yep.
And we moved to California when I was obviously 16 and was there until about 10 years ago.
Yep. Yeah. So let's slow that down a bit. So when you were, what can you remember about the Philippines?
The Philippines was early childhood.
So were you, I guess language-wise, what were you speaking?
It was mostly English, to be honest with you.
Oh, so you speak English?
So most places there. So it's originally a Spanish colony.
Yep.
So the native language has a lot of Spanish mixed into it.
Mm-hmm.
And it became an American colony, one of the American colonies. So basically all of school in the area I grew up in is taught in English.
Okay.
So everyone, if you were to visit
the
Philippines, especially Manila, everyone speaks English.
So is it like a so even all the public schools are English speaking schools?
Yes, English speaking.
Okay.
Actually, there's a separate language to teach you Tagalog, which is the official native language.
Yep.
And there's a special class for that, but the rest of the classes, geography, history, is taught in English.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I guess so the Philippines back then, or Manila back then, have you been back to Manila since?
Yeah, we've been back. I took my kids there and my wife to visit. Must be about 7 years ago now.
Yep.
Just so they could meet my sister who's still there and just see the Philippines.
Okay. So when you did you follow your mum or your dad when you went to the States?
So I followed. My mother took me when I was 7.
Okay.
When they split up.
Yep. And was she already an American citizen or how?
No. So my grandmother was an American citizen.
Yep.
And so she was able to get sponsored through my grandmother.
Yep.
Which is how many people get into the States, is they're sponsored by a relative and they're able to immigrate.
Yep. Okay. And was it when you were 7, so what's that? That would have been like kindergarten?
So I'm just thinking those
are year 2, somewhere around there.
Yeah. I was actually year 4 at that point. Yeah.
Okay. And then was that a big adjustment?
I think so. From what I remember.
Yep.
The interesting thing is, people probably say this about Asian people, but I said, everyone here looks the same to me. It took us a while getting used to it, and but I was quickly assimilated. The language was no issue, right? Obviously going in, and I quickly adopted and quickly became a New Jersey kid.
Yeah.
America has a great way of assimilating people from all cultures.
Yep.
And you become American first and whatever you are. second.
Yeah. That's true. I can definitely see that. They're very, there's a lot of patriotism.
Yeah. They make you. It becomes part of the, like from kindergarten. You face the corner of the room where there's the American flag, and you pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America.
Yeah.
So just over and over and over again, it becomes part of you.
Yep.
For better or worse, which is good, because I think, to be honest with you, I think that's one thing. I guess that's a double-edged sword, right? The nationalism that you see there.
Yeah.
You don't have that so much here in Australia. In one way, it's uniting, because it doesn't matter what color your skin is.
Yeah.
You're still American. But then in another sense, you're American, and everyone, and there's everyone else. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. See, I always find that, sort of that dichotomy very interesting, because, I think, when in Australia, when people ask you, oh, so where are you from? And you say, Sydney, and then they turn around and say, no, where are you, as in like, where's your ancestry from, type of a thing.
Yeah. That's true.
I don't know whether that's just the way that we say it as Aussies. Like, we just say, where are you from? And we assume, that people are going to tell us their family history, as opposed to, where are you from? Like, I go to Melbourne, and then the taxi driver will say, oh, where are you from? And I'll say Sydney. And then, sometimes that's okay. And then sometimes, no, as in like, where's your background?
No. Actually, I can only speak from, because I lived in New Jersey and New York and California. And in those states, you're either, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. Are you from, it's a bigger deal if you're, like, for example, California, are you from NorCal or Southern Cal?
Yeah.
And it tells a lot more about you
Yep.
than the color of your skin or whatever.
Yep.
Or what team do you support? What are you a fan of the Dodgers or the Giants? That's a bigger deal.
Okay.
In some ways. Obviously race is an issue.
Yep.
But I think less so. There's still lots of discrimination, as you can see.
Yeah.
But they have a good way of assimilating people.
Bring you in. Yep.
I don't know if that's not always completely a good thing.
Yep.
But they're definitely, I think, in some ways, I wish Australia was better at that.
Yep. Yeah. I find the thing that I always think is interesting is, like, when we have overseas students come for university, as an example, and I say this, in terms of, having met quite a few, mainland Chinese friends as a result of it, or, overseas Chinese people.
Sure.
And, the thing that they always struggle with is, they end up passing their tests, through like IELTS or whatever the English course that they're doing is, but their actual grasp of the language is still very archaic. Like, it's very rudimentary, because they don't really get out of their comfort zone. Like, people stay in their comfort zone, and they'll just associate with people who are similar. Probably also other students who are from overseas, and they don't really get out there and experience, I guess, and talk with locals, and I guess try and establish those relationships with a lot more local people, I guess.
Yeah. I think that's a natural thing, because people tend to gravitate towards others they have things in common with.
Yep.
Right? Because it brings comfort. Oh, you eat the same kinds of foods I do, or you listen to the same kind of music. There's a certain comfort in that commonality. Yeah. And I think maybe that was a way in previous generations. But I think, look, anyone who stretches outside their comfort zone, as you know, I mean, we share common hobbies, and every time you push that comfort zone a little bit further, you grow as a person. Yeah. And that goes for everything, whether it's culture, whether it's, academics, whether it's anything physical. Yep. The only time you're growing is on the edge.
Yep. No, it's 100% true. You got to be slightly out of your comfort zone.
Absolutely.
And the sooner you adapt to that, the faster you grow and develop.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So Jersey would be on the East Coast.
It's correct? On the East Coast. Yes.
Yep.
It's like the armpit of the United States.
The armpit?
Yeah, it's the armpit of the United States. It's the Garden State, but people live in New Jersey, and there's some nice parts, but it's not New York. It's not Manhattan.
Okay.
So everything else gets measured up to. I mean, Manhattan is like everyone knows Manhattan.
Yeah, it's like the gold standard, right?
Yeah, it's a gold standard. Everything else, especially New Jersey, pales in comparison. But it was good. It was good. New Jersey taught me a lot of things. I got rid of the accent pretty quickly.
Yep.
But it was growing up with this, being taken care of by a single mother. It's pretty rough, some parts of Jersey.
Yeah.
Which in some ways was quite good.
Yeah.
Because it pushed me way outside of my comfort zone. If you want to push yourself, move to a different country, that's pretty big.
Yeah, of course. And well, obviously, at least language wasn't so much of a barrier, but there still would have been like nuances in terms of slang and accent. That, did it make you feel like an outsider when you first went there?
To be honest with you, I was just thinking about that the other day. I'm pretty used to being an outsider, whether it's moving country, which, I obviously moved country about 10 years ago. And even though I've been here 10 years, my accent makes me stick out like a sore thumb. Or whether it's because of my ethnic background, you're an outsider, or I've gotten used to being an outsider. So it's good. It's good.
And then, so after New Jersey, then you moved to New York?
No. So New Jersey.
Then to California?
Then to California.
Okay. NorCal, SoCal?
Los Angeles.
Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Okay. And how old were you?
I was 16 years old.
And then how did you find that transition?
It was good. I had more. I think part of the reason why I moved there is, and I think my mother wanted to move me there because she saw me sort of straying into, I guess, troubled waters with friends. I was getting caught ditching school or skipping school to go to New York City a bit. I got caught by the truancy police.
And what were you doing when you were?
So we were going to, this is New York back in the 90s, by the way. This is before they cleaned up New York. This is, we were getting fake IDs. Myself, my good Puerto Rican friend Orlando, and Alex. We were three friends on the wrestling team, and we decided, I forget whose idea it was. I think it might have been mine. It might have been my idea. We decided to skip school, and we were 14 at the time, and we decided to get IDs to show that we were 18.
Yep.
And so we brought our backpacks with us, took the train in, which is 30 minutes into New York City, and Alex kept his backpack on. We're walking around. He dips into a bar and immediately gets pulled up by the police. There's truancy police looking for 14-year-old kids, obviously. And this is 42nd Street. This is, again, before they cleaned it up. So there were drug dealers and thieves on every corner. And so they probably, for our safety, they pulled us up. They brought us into the police station, and they called our parents to come pick us up.
Wow. Yeah. And like, would you have recognized that they were drug dealers and that sort of thing when you guys were walking there?
Yeah. Look, I think it's something. Well, my mother used to take me into New York City at least once a month.
Yep.
I guess it becomes part of the norm, right? I mean, here in Australia, I guess one of the things when I moved here, I noticed that it's much safer here. Honestly, it's much safer here, like than parts of the States.
Yeah.
By a huge margin.
Yeah.
For example, one of my good friends was a primary school teacher in the Bronx, and this is just recently in the past, 5 years, and he was teaching year 4, and one of his duties was metal detector duty. So he had to search kids because it would bring in guns from home, and this is year 4 kids.
Yeah.
It's a different. Whenever I tell teachers that here, they're just gobsmacked.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we were. I've gotten.
No, that's all right.
We've sidetracked.
We're fine to sidetrack. We can sidetrack as much as we want. So pulled up by the truancy police. Was it easy to get a fake ID back then?
Yes, absolutely. I think I still might have it. Because we did get the fake IDs and then we were caught, which was perfect because we still had the fake IDs.
Yeah.
And they didn't search us. But yeah, that's that. So my mother found that I was steering towards. She felt I needed male role models.
Okay.
So we moved to Los Angeles, a little north of Los Angeles, where I had more extended family, uncles, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so we moved to California, and I finished high school there.
Yeah.
At Saugus High. That's actually, to be honest, there was just a school shooting at that high school I graduated from a couple of weeks ago.
Yep.
Just recently.
Yep.
So again, it's a different world.
Different world. And then so academically, how did you find your schooling years? Like, did you perform strongly academically, or
Look, I didn't get my act together until much later. I think I would fall asleep. No, I wasn't really focused.
Yeah.
I wasn't really focused in school. I would always do pretty well on the standardized tests.
Mm-hmm.
But I never did. To be perfectly honest, I was probably a mix of A's, B's, and C's. I would get A's if I liked the teachers. I would get C's, maybe an occasional D if I didn't have an interest in the subject.
Yep.
But it was really a mix of things. I wasn't really focused. I didn't get my act together until I was about 18 or 19 perhaps.
Was there any particular reason for that?
Look, I think at 18 or 19 I realized, so I have a sister who's about 10 years older than I am.
Mm-hmm.
She has, so she's 10 years older. She had traumatic brain injury when she was about 4.
Wow.
And so...
What happened?
So she fell off a balcony in the Philippines. She fell off a balcony head first. There's no railing, so she hit the concrete.
Yep.
And so after she hit the concrete, she wasn't brought to the hospital.
Yep.
And eventually, when she was brought to the hospital after she started becoming quite lethargic and quite... She's very hard to rouse. Yeah. Well, not just concussed, but she had a hematoma. She had bleeding in her brain.
Yep.
Ideally, now what you would do is you'd probably take her to the hospital right away. You'd scan and drain the fluid. Yep. Put basically what's called perhaps a burr hole in to basically
allow the fluid to
drain. And save the brain that you can. Right. That's probably what should have happened. Back then. Look, I think that was in the late 60s, early 70s when that happened. So it wasn't there, and the recognition wasn't there. Yep. I don't know if they had the scans there. Yep. And it was you have to imagine it's a developing country as well.
Of course, yeah. So
basically, even she's alive now.
Yep.
But she's got the mental age of a 3-year-old without any mobility.
So no mobility.
Yeah. Well, I mean, she's basically spastic. She cannot walk. She can't even feed herself. She can't go to the toilet. So she's got a couple of nannies looking after her.
Yeah.
So around 18 or 19, after I realized that, look, I'm probably going to be looking after her a fair bit. I can't just fart around and just get A's, B's, and C's. What kind of... the jobs I had at that point were basically, loading trucks for the UPS or, working retail.
Yep.
It wasn't really going to cut it. So I decided to get my act together and put my nose down back and just grind away at the classes. And I wanted to be a physiotherapist.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that was a goal. I thought that was going big, and I started getting pretty good grades. And someone said to me, "Why don't you consider going into medicine?" Mm-hmm. I said, "No, I don't want to go into medicine. I don't know anyone who goes into medicine. There's no way I'm going to get into medicine.
Yep.
So just give it a go." So I kept going, and I started becoming a game to me, like with the grades.
Yep.
I said, I didn't really I didn't know I could apply myself until, that age. And then it became, after I got my feet, it got easier and easier, and it became fun.
Yep.
It became really fun. And I realized I started enjoying what I was learning. I truly enjoyed.
Yeah, I think when you get good at things, you're always going to enjoy it more.
Yes.
Because it just feeds the machine.
Yeah. And it becomes a game, and then you have more fun, and it's even more of a game, right?
Yeah.
Powers
the obsession.
It's that positive feedback loop, right?
Yeah.
And that goes with anything. I mean, and so I kept going. And then got into medical school, and one thing led to another, and chose my career. I was choosing between, I think it's largely because of my sister. I was choosing between acute care specialties. So some of the acute care specialties would be intensive care, emergency medicine, trauma surgery, anesthetics.
Yep.
But at that point, I realized, so that was probably in my 20s, I realized I also, besides enjoying this game, besides enjoying what I was learning, I realized I wanted to have a family as well, and some sort of a decent lifestyle.
Yep.
And so I still remember my chief resident of surgery. He sat me down. He took me aside at the end of our surgery rotation. He goes, "Mark, I could really see you doing trauma surgery, but if you could see yourself doing anything else, that's what I would choose."
Yeah.
So basically, all the surgeons I knew back then, even when they were done with their training, at least in the States, they were working,
ridiculous hours.
Still like 100-hour weeks.
Yep.
100-hour weeks as trauma surgeons, quite easily.
Yeah.
And that's not really conducive. It's
family life.
It's very hard. Yeah. It's hardly even conducive to work, 40, 50 hours a week and have family life.
That's right. Yeah.
It's hard enough doing that. So, I mean.
And the weight that's on your shoulders,
Yeah.
You're dealing with very heavy situations. And
that, I think you can get used to that, honestly.
I think it desensitizes you, doesn't it?
Yeah. Oh, you have to be. You have to be, though, right?
Yeah.
But that's what the training is for, is you have seen this so many times that it becomes second nature. And you can equate that to, I know you, Johnny, you strike and you grapple. For other people, getting put into that scenario it's pretty confronting, right? But if you've been there enough times, it's not.
Yeah.
That's what the training's for, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's the same with trauma surgery or emergency medicine or anesthetics. You get these crisis situations. The difference between, for example, primary care and acute care is basically the time factor. You have to act quickly. Primary care, if someone's got high blood pressure, if you don't give them medicine, they come back in 3 weeks. They're still going to be okay.
Yeah.
But if you're a surgeon, if you don't
operate immediately,
they're dead within hours. So there's a bit of a time pressure there. But I think that's what the training is for.
Yep. So then, how did you make that choice?
Look, at least in the States, there was no real family lifestyle offered with trauma surgery. And I didn't really see it in intensive care. So the only other two choices were emergency medicine and anesthetics. And a couple of my smartest classmates went to emergency medicine, but I didn't think I was. Look, you have to be, a good friend of mine, Ben, who went to emergency medicine, really one of the smartest guys I've ever met, said to me, it's almost like I've read the first 3 chapters of every textbook, and that's it. So you never really know. You're not a specialist in anything. You're a jack of all trades, master of none. So that's why I chose anesthetics.
Okay, because you wanted to specialize?
Yes, I wanted to specialize. I wanted to be an expert in something.
Yeah. So when you were going through that sort of transition, in your own mental space about, okay, you've got this sister and now you're deciding to apply yourself. Did you have any role models that or was it just something that you just started putting this pressure on yourself, and you didn't really? Did you give yourself a choice? Was there another choice, or was there you didn't even think about that
when I was choosing between
when you were trying? So the thing that I always think about is that, humans and people in general, we're always creatures of habit where we tend to always fall into the path of least resistance.
Yes. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, one of my light bulb moments from my life was, the day that I decided that, I'm not going to rely on hitting the snooze button. I'm just, when the alarm goes off, up I get.
Yep.
And away I go. And, I when I started to apply myself, I guess I didn't give myself any other option other than to be successful or finish this or finish that. I never really saw any other option.
Sure.
And I think, having that pressure was what allowed me to achieve some of the things that I did. So I'm just sort of curious, did you have someone that you were looking at and then was thinking, that could be me, or was it more just an internalized pressure?
Well, actually, can I ask you a question on that? Do you feel like you had any other choice but to do that?
I didn't. I didn't give myself a choice. So I guess, I was fortunate, I had my mum, was very big on academics and schooling.
Sure.
And so, I had, the extracurricular activities up to a point where, I sort of got, to this point where it was then, okay, it's up to me. And so I guess my sort of moment was, my parents were going through a tough period towards, I think it would have been like maybe when I was in year 11 or something like that. And then, my mum was also going through some things because she had a car accident. And basically what happened was I think a teenager was running across the road to chase a tennis ball and obviously didn't look before chasing the ball. I don't know the full story, but from what I understand, obviously, he hit the car, or the car hit him or her.
Wow. Yeah.
And they went through the windscreen.
Oh, wow.
And that was really sort of traumatic for my mum.
Yeah.
And we didn't really I guess at that age I didn't really think about how do you deal with something like that, and my dad probably didn't think about that, and my brother, who's 7 years older than me, none of us really thought about it.
Yep.
And so then she started to, I guess, you don't feel good when something like that happens, even if it's an accident.
Sure.
And that sort of, I think that was probably the sort of breaking point mentally for her, because my mum's always been a very strong woman. Like she was running her own business, running her own real estate agency, and everything was going well, apart from some difficulties with my dad, and then that probably would have tipped her over the edge. And so my mum progressively had some, I guess, issues with some of her mental health, and so she struggled with that. And I didn't really know how to help her. I guess my dad wasn't really in a position to help her because the trust and
wasn't
commitment
there.
in that relationship was already struggling.
It was
strained. And then I think at that time my brother was probably overseas. Mm-hmm. He might have come back, or I can't quite remember. But my brother was studying overseas for quite a period of time, and so there was a point where I finally said to my mum, I think you need to take some time away. And I remember you
said that to her.
I said that to her, and I said, why don't you go and visit family overseas?
How old were you?
This would have been
year 11.
No. So that would have been probably maybe a couple of years later, because things just like when it all happened, it was all too fresh, kind of a thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then so year 12 it was just basically do whatever I can to sort of get through.
Sure.
And my results were okay, and I managed to get into UTS and study engineering science and law. And then I think it would have been maybe after my first or second year,
Sure.
that I said to my mum that, you know, she needs to spend some time away.
Yep.
And I bought her a ticket to go visit family, and she almost didn't come back. Like, she just spent all the time sort of bouncing between Singapore and Malaysia.
Sure.
Trying to, you know, refresh her visa, but she went there with, you know, 2 suitcases full of luggage and clothes and all that. And when she went, you know, she seemed happy enough. But then, you know, over time, those underlying issues probably bubbled to the surface, and she didn't want to come back. And basically, by the time she did come back, she'd practically been living on the street for probably 2 weeks before she finally allowed us to buy her a ticket and come back. And so I guess, you know, when all this was going on, like, I think up until the point when my mum came back. And,
Sure.
So I think my dad must have picked her up from the office or something, and then I was probably working or out or something. But I still remember I came to visit her at my parents' office, and she was like really tanned, obviously, because she's been out on the street, and she was gaunt, like she hadn't been eating, and that sort of imagery seared into my brain. But you know, that was
especially that's your mother.
That's right. You know, and so then that was the sort of, I guess, the first time that, you know, I guess, you know, we sort of reflected on it and we're like, we need to get her some help.
Yeah.
You know, and then where do you start? Like, you know, if you don't know, how do you go and address something like that?
Look, I think most developed countries are not very good at it to begin with. I think Asian culture is even worse at it. You know, but as I've grown older, I've realized mental health issues are health issues. Yeah, they're just the same.
Yep,
you know what I mean?
They are.
In fact, you can't see them.
Yep.
Which makes it even worse.
Yep. Yeah.
Right?
Well, it's stigmatized, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, you know, for my mum, you know, being a successful businesswoman, you know, she's got that pride that, you know, like, you know, I don't have mental illness. I don't have, you know, there's nothing wrong with me, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And so sometimes that'd be like, you know, trying to diagnose your own health problems, right? Like it's
no, I know.
You know,
there's no insight. There's no insight.
Exactly. So, you know, that sort of pushed me to really knuckle down and realize that, you know, hey, if somebody's going to fix it, well, you know, I've got to do my part.
Yeah.
So that was, you know, I didn't give myself a choice. You know, when I went to uni, like I realized, hey, I can't just
exactly.
You know, take it easy. Like, you know, I think my first year was fun because you know, I probably spent, you know, 70 to 80% of it on the basketball court with my other mates, because first year was sort of like, you know, a recap of what you did in high school.
I think that's part of growing up.
Yeah.
Though, right.
And then, but after that, then it was basically, you know, I ended up getting a job.
Yep.
You know, and then that, like, you know, so I got an apprenticeship at a Toyota dealership, and that was actually some of the hardest years of my life because I was working practically full time. And as an apprentice, you know, back then I was making $4 an hour, so it wasn't great money. I was at TAFE 1 day a week, and I was doing 5 subjects a semester. So basically, I wanted to finish early, and you know, when I tell people about this, they go, "How did you fit it all in?" And my answer is that I didn't really give myself a choice. Yeah. You know, and then, you know, I talked
because there is no other choice.
There was no other choice. Yeah. You know, I needed to pass. I needed to get through it and finish, and I needed to work because I couldn't rely on money to come in. Like I had to start making my own money to buy textbooks and you know, support, you know, my lifestyle and the things that I wanted to do, etc. So I didn't really ever think about there being any other choice. No, like, you know, and I think like would I change anything? Well, at the end of the day, there's no real point thinking about it.
No.
Right? You can only make the best of what you've got.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Look, it sounds like your situation is pretty similar to mine.
Yeah.
You see a family member, for
Yep.
example, I had my sister,
Mm.
and you don't really have a choice. You got to get your shit together.
Yep.
Because this is not about you.
Yep.
It's about someone else.
Yep.
If it was just about, you or me, then you'd still be playing basketball, right?
Probably. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is actually, sometimes I wonder whether or not there's truly free will, because that's not really, I don't know if that was a choice to make for either of us.
Yeah.
Right? Like you get put into certain situation. You have, I don't know if either of us had a choice, man.
You can, I would say there is always a choice. There's only ever two choices. And one choice is you take you do the activity, or you choose not to. So you either choose to apply yourself, or you choose not to. And any time that you sort of say, I'm still considering it, well, really, you made the choice not to.
Yeah.
Because I guess, the way that I would think about it is I made the choice not to up until that point when I changed my mind, and now I've chosen to do it, right?
So just to play devil's advocate there, I think even though it seems like you've picked a more difficult choice, putting your nose to the grindstone and buckling down and doing the work, the alternative would be the path of more resistance, in fact, because the pain and suffering that would have occurred if you didn't get your act together, that would have been much worse.
Honestly, I've never really thought about any other alternatives. I can't really say that I considered any other option. Like I do, like I still remember that, even when I finished uni and my apprenticeship and all that sort of stuff, I would still have nightmares that, I'd wake up very vividly and, imagine there was an exam on, and then I'd have to sort of reassure myself by looking at the certificates to say that I passed.
Yes.
And I was
know
like,
that feeling.
yeah.
I know that feeling.
Right. And then it was like,
Was that a dream?
Yeah.
Was that a dream?
Yeah, that's right. But, I remember someone saying to me, like, I think somebody said it to me that, when you keep having recurring sort of dreams like that, it's a symbol of that was this, a particular hardship, a traumatic sort of hardship.
Yes.
that you went through.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, I think when you don't have any of those options, that's when you can actually achieve something wonderful.
What did I hear the other day? Nothing great ever came out of feeling good. No, really. If you think about like truly great achievements, there's not many people, let's say, what's a good suburb here in Mossman? You don't see Mike Tyson or Albert Einstein or people who who feel a need to achieve coming out of comfort, right? It's always out of pain. Whether it's pain brought about by traumatic situations or whether it's some sort of self-loathing because someone's got mother or father issues.
Okay. Isn't that the two great motivators, either pain or pleasure? We chase things for pleasure, or we do them in fear of pain.
I think the pain is trying to escape pain is perhaps the bigger motivator. I could be wrong.
Yep.
That could be it.
Yeah.
I remember when I got into medical school, I got my acceptance, and so but I still had another year, and so over there it's you do a bachelor's degree and then you apply for medical school postgrad. I found out I got into medical school, and I said, what am I going to do with all this free time? I said to myself, oh, you know what? Why don't I apply to law school as well? Because my father was because of father issues and my parents splitting up, I always felt like I had a chip on my shoulder. I needed to prove my father wrong, or I just needed to prove myself to him, I should say. And so the first thing I did after I got my acceptance to medical school is I hit the books, and I got into law school as well. I didn't go.
Yep.
I didn't go, but I just wanted to. I didn't even tell him, but I just wanted to give him a middle finger, basically by showing him I could do what or get into the same schools that he did.
Yep.
But I think that's a driving force. I think, at least for me.
Yeah, it was a motivation.
It's a motivation.
Well, so I guess from that perspective, then rather than I guess it was not so much the role model, but the anti-role.
Absolutely, yeah.
That sort of helped to shape.
I think so. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So that the sister that had the accident. Have you got one sister or two?
One sister.
One sister. So it's that sister who's 10 years older.
She's 10 years older than I am. Yeah.
So then, so when you were growing up, like, were you aware of it, or I guess?
Oh, look, whether it's conscious or subconscious, I think as I was growing up, I kept it subconscious, and I didn't let it reach my conscious until I was sort of 18 or 19 before I started actually applying myself.
Yeah. But was she still living in the Philippines?
She's still there. She's still in Manila.
Yeah.
She's still there because basically I think it's a more comfortable life there.
Yeah. Well, it's easier to get people to
take care of her. It's harder in a developed country. I don't think she would get as good. The care here would not be as good as there. She's got basically.
Well, and the costs would be astronomical too.
Exactly. Oh, it'd be unbelievable, especially for non-resident.
Yep.
I think it's just untenable.
Yep. Okay. And so, talk me through how do you go from medical school and then specialize in anesthesiology?
So in the States, it was anesthesiology. Here in Australia, it's anesthetics.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided I wanted to do anesthetics because I still wanted to do acute care, but I still wanted a life outside of my specialty.
Yep.
And I still liked the operating theater setting, and I chose anesthetics for that reason. I finished my medical school at University of California, Irvine. Mm-hmm. Then I did my residency and anesthetics training at UCLA.
Mm-hmm.
I met my wife actually while I was doing my training.
Okay.
But we met on holiday in New Zealand.
Wow. Okay. Of all places.
So I probably should admit this. I'm a bit of a Lord of the Rings nerd, and so
you were trying to tour Middle Earth.
I was, to be honest with you. So that's one of my guilty pleasures. Not so much the movies, but the book.
Yep.
I think that I did appreciate Tolkien. So, but I did want, and New Zealand is perhaps the most beautiful country in the world. I think there's an argument to be made for that, and I really did enjoy it. And I think that's how I got my wife to fall in love with me, is because she met me in New Zealand.
So whereabouts in New Zealand?
We met in Auckland, but we were north as well as the South Island.
Okay. So how did you meet there?
So we were both on a tour, actually. Both on a tour, and I think it was about 7 days that we were together. I think it was 7 days. My wife will probably correct me. I'm sure I'm wrong by a day or two. And I think we thought that was it. I flew back to Los Angeles. She flew back to Sydney. And then I called her. And I think somehow I called her and somehow she decided to call me back. And then it went back and forth. We did a long distance thing for a few months.
Wow.
That was really hard.
Yeah.
Especially in those days, I'll be honest with you.
Yeah. You don't have the same connectivity.
No, there's no Skype. It's just phone cards and there's nothing else.
Yeah.
We would actually I would send her letters by post.
Yep.
Sometimes. And she basically within a few months, she moved over to Los Angeles,
Wow.
much to her family's dismay.
They would have been like, who the
No,
hell
it's
is
true.
this guy, right?
I'm looking at it now.
Yeah.
Like I could have been anyone. I could have
Yeah.
lied about everything.
Yeah.
And somehow she still moved there.
Yeah.
So we were together I finished my training there. We were married very soon afterwards. Don't tell my kids, don't get married that quickly. The story I will tell is, to be honest with you, with my wife, I think, we're obviously compatible. We've been married for more than 15 years now.
Yeah.
But I think to a certain extent we got lucky.
Mm.
It just so happened we saw eye to eye on, there's love, right?
Mm.
But it also helps if you have the same idea about, how to spend your money
of course.
and, the sort of values you want, like how you want to raise do you want kids? How do you want to raise your kids if you want them? And obviously but whenever you have two different people, there's going to be some amount of disagreement, but
of course,
overall we kind of agree on just most things.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of things, even from a cultural perspective, growing up in two different countries, you're going to have different perspectives on things. And I always think that, sometimes it's those more rational elements are like the glue that holds you together.
That's true.
Because, as we know, emotions fluctuate.
Absolutely.
And you can feel one way, like as an example, you can get very angry about something and be fine with it the next moment.
I don't know about you. My wife is perfect. I don't know what you're talking about. She's always stable and always calm. So I'm not sure what you're saying.
You don't need to talk it up just because the red light is on. Let's.
Oh, is it on? Oh, I thought we were still off. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I think to have some of those, I guess, rational elements that that remind you of. I always think of it as they serve to remind me of why I fell in love with my wife. And so the times when you get busy with work, as an example, and you don't feel as close to them because you haven't had that chance to connect.
Absolutely. Yeah. Or you're tired with your kids.
Yeah. You've got all these other pressures. Oh, yeah. But then when you have that opportunity when you reflect on it, I think that's the glue that keeps it all together.
Yeah.
And you just made me think about how so Ange and I, Ange's Catholic, and so we did the marriage course before we got married. I don't know if you did the same thing, but it's quite interesting. Like you go through this questionnaire, and I guess it challenges you to think about, have you guys discussed this? Have you discussed how you want to raise your kids? Have you discussed what's your approach to money? Yeah. Right, like all these sorts of things.
I didn't do the course.
You didn't do the course?
No, I didn't do the course. But I think those are good questions to ask.
Mm. Yeah, well, the guy that was running the course, he was saying, like they've had people that go and do the course and it falls to pieces, like literally at the course.
Really?
Yeah. So people who about to get married and then they go and do this and realize, hey, actually, there's so many things that we don't agree upon. Yeah. Like so, it's more. I think the course is there more to start that conversation, because if you haven't considered those things, then I guess it's a very like I said, a very rational way to sort of approach things. And then I think, sometimes we don't get to put all our cards on the table. Yeah. And then we should, because, transparency.
That's a big deal. This is perhaps the biggest choice. I think I listened to an interview with Bill Gates and Melinda Gates, and they said perhaps more important than your career choice is your partner choice, because it'll set the tone for the rest of your life. But I think that course is probably a good thing.
Yeah.
I didn't think it would be that good, actually.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I just thought it was, I thought, I can see the benefit for it, for relationships in general. Yeah. Because, if there's things that you haven't, and I always relate it back to car sales, because that's the industry that I'm in, right?
Sure.
And so, in car sales, we talk about this, there's a process that we call the road to a sale. So it's basically like how do we try and assist a customer with their purchasing decision? So, like there's steps that sort of go through it, and it's the basics. Making sure that when you meet somebody, you meet and greet effectively, and you introduce yourself properly, and you give off a professional vibe, and then the next portion of that is to then actually the second stage is to go through like what we call a needs discovery. So we try and identify what it is that you actually need in the vehicle, and so as an example, if you're looking for a people mover, you don't buy a sports car with two seats, right? Like exactly. It sounds
silly,
but it's about understanding what does the client actually want to achieve out of purchasing this vehicle, and then after that sort of needs discovery, we go through a vehicle selection and presentation. So we pick the vehicle, and then we showcase the vehicle. We explain what are the highlights and what are the key features and how do they work and what are the advantages and benefits to the client. And then we go for a test drive to make sure that everything is to their expectation. Can they see themselves in this car? Is that the right fit? Is it going to tick the boxes? Is it going to
you should be a marriage consultant. I think this is this is pretty good.
But this is like and I'll link it back at the end of it. But and then after that, then we go into this process where after the test drive, we're going to present the figures. We're going to show what are the figures, and then sometimes there's a negotiation. Sometimes people are happy if the car's on promotion or whatever the case may be, and then we try and obviously funnel it towards a vehicle sale. And the parallel between sales and life is something that I see in so many different aspects. So if we use the relationship example, when you go and meet somebody, that first impression is so important. That impression that when you meet that person sets the tone of the interaction. And if the meet and greet was positive, like you've met them and there's some interest there, then you go through that process of needs discovery. You're going to find out more about each other, what each person is looking for, and what's important, and then we go through that period of where we have to select a person that we're going to choose to be with. And in some cases, you might be talking to multiple people, right? This is a common scenario. Where somebody might be talking to multiple people and potentially have options to go into relationships with one or the other. Like there might be two choices as an example. And then we go through that dating process, and that's like the test drive. And, it may work out and we say that's the right car for us or the right person for us, or it may not be the right vehicle, right? And then we go back to the start of that process and we start again. But that sort of parallel between matchmaking a person and matchmaking a car or any sort of object, that's almost like a roadmap for life. Yeah.
Look, I had a patient of mine actually who was she's a professional. She is a professional matchmaker, and she describes a process. She would actually, I was her anaesthetist, and she was like, "Do you know any female doctors?" Yeah. I said, "Oh yeah." Are they? Can you tell me about them? I'm like, "Look, I have to do your anesthetic." She's like, "No, just tell me. Are they?" She would ask questions like, "Are they, nationality?" Because some people have a certain preference for nationality.
Yep, of course.
She asked, "Are they damaged? Are they damaged?" as if you'd ask about a car. Has it been in a previous accident?
Yeah.
And I think these are good questions actually, but I think this is all part of choosing. I mean, this is the biggest when you're choosing a partner. It's the biggest choice in someone's life, really.
Yeah.
Actually, to be honest with you, I worry. I've worried a lot about my kids. To be honest with you, their choice in partner, because you never know. You never know. Luckily, with my wife and I, we're just, we're going well.
You're fortunate, yeah.
I mean, I hate to say it, but it's true, and I just hope my kids are as fortunate as I'm sure. Yeah, hope the same for yours. I know your kids are very young still, and
that's right. Well, look, at the end of the day, you know, there's some level of education that you can try and provide, you know, but at the end of the day, it's going to be their choice, and so I sort of look at it from the perspective of, if I can at least provide a good framework for them to make a good an informed decision, then that's all I can do, you know. That's why I always relate it back to, I guess, you know, I can see that parallel between you know, car sales and matchmaking in that regard.
How long have you been doing car sales? How many years?
So funnily enough, so when I started in the industry, I started back in probably 2004.
Yeah.
I didn't start.
That's a long time, actually.
Yeah. So I didn't start out in car sales. I started obviously as an apprentice mechanic, and I got my trade first. I really only got really deep into.
So wait a second. You went to UTS for engineering and law.
Yep.
And then you decided. I missed the part where you became an apprentice mechanic.
Yeah. So that was in my probably at the end of my second year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So at the end of the second year, start of my third year, that's probably when I did that.
You decided.
I was looking for work.
Okay.
So one of the things I can remember about that was I was looking at the time. I was thinking about, you know, what sort of graduate positions
Sure.
I wanted to get, and so I had options because, you know, I was still a few years off from graduating, and I saw in the local paper was an ad for apprentices wanted, and it was for the local Toyota dealership. And so I went in there with a resume, spoke to the receptionist, and Cami was her name, and I said to Cami, "Oh, look, Cami, I'm looking for an apprenticeship. I am studying full time, so I'm not sure if your boss, you know, would be interested in employing somebody like me, but here's my resume, and, you know, if there's anything available, please let me know." And then 4 weeks later, so I didn't hear anything for probably about 4 weeks, and then I thought, oh well, it is what it is. Then I got a phone call from Mark Fitzgerald, who was the dealer principal of that business, and he said to me, you know, I still remember, you know, the first thing he said to me was, "Johnny Yap, why do you want to be a mechanic?" That was his first question, just straight between the eyes. And I said to him, you know, just because I start there doesn't mean that that's where I finish. And I think that resonated with him and his background. And so, yeah, like it was interesting because I guess, you know, even when I started, you know, it probably didn't help my relationships with the other people in the team when, you know, the owner's walking around and people say, "Oh, this is the new whiz kid, you know, who's studying at university." So I already had to deal with, I guess, some of that, you know, where people have this expectation of you.
Yep.
But, you know, it's like not warranted, right? Like I haven't, I'm an apprentice. I'm there to try and learn. Like I'm not coming in saying that I know how to do it.
No, you should be just like everyone else.
Just like everyone else. And it was tough because you know, it was hard because, you know, there were, like, you know, I'd get time off for exams and things like that. You know,
and the others wouldn't.
Of course, yeah, because they weren't studying.
Yeah.
So I got some of those reprieves, but then on the flip side, right, like I was still doing a full-time load. So I'd actually miss quite a few of my classes during the days, and I just So back then, I had a motorbike, and so I'd just basically leave work straight to uni, 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock, for whatever days I'd go. You know, I didn't go every day, basically try and complete everything. And you know, it was some of those days were pretty miserable because you know, when you only have one mode of transport. I did the stupid thing and I didn't have any wet weather gear, so I used to get soaked and just sit there in a freezing cold lecture theatre, drenched in water, and just cop it for 3 hours and then get back on a soggy bike and ride back, right? Like that was my life back then. As I said, you don't really think about it, right? Like it is. No,
exactly.
Yeah.
There's no other choice.
Yeah, there's no other choice. Yeah. Just cop it and move on.
Yeah.
But yeah, so let's get back to you. So when you finished your course, like how was that transition between obviously, I guess you obviously have that element where you're doing like an internship type.
Yeah, so it's I did 5 years of undergraduate university, bachelor's of science in biology, and then you do 4 years of medical school. So that's 9 years so far, and then I did 1 year of internship, 3 years. So we're up to 13 now. So that's anesthetics training in the States. I finished my anesthesiology training there, and I did another couple of years of fellowship at Royal Prince Alfred here in Sydney. So round about 15 years.
15 years of schooling.
After high school, yeah.
After high school.
After high school.
That's longer than you would have been in school.
Yeah, exactly. So that brings me back to that what you were talking about before about the transition. It's just over and over and over again. You get put into these situations. You have a long time to you're presented with a clinical problem. You've been there before. And that being said, I have to tell you those years of anesthetics training in the States, it was, my wife timed it. Some weeks I would be gone for about 128 hours a week. I'd be at work.
Yep.
So you got to think that's like 3 full-time jobs, and just be. So you're basically cramming 1 or 3 years into one.
Wow.
So it's a lot of time.
Yeah. So, did you feel jaded when you came out of that process?
No, I enjoyed it.
You enjoyed it?
I really enjoyed it. Both from a intellectual perspective, obviously, because I was learning a lot. Learning medicine is like learning a new language, learning multiple skills, while trying to stay on the good side of your clinical instructors, your professors, the nurses. So you're learning a lot.
But by the time you complete that process, like 15 years is a long time.
It's a long time.
Knowledge would have changed in that time.
And you would get updated all the time, and it changes all the time now.
Yeah.
Which is why you basically have to keep continuing to study. To be honest with you, I continue both my certification in the States as well as here.
Yeah.
And involves simulation training where you have to go in. Crisis training that's mandated both in the U.S. and here, but you know how we don't do it to the same extent that pilots do, but simulation, with a dummy, and you're put into different clinical scenarios. Patient has an allergic reaction on the table, patient has massive blood loss on the table, what have you, and you have to respond quickly.
Yeah.
So it's still it's ongoing training. It's ongoing training.
And have you ever faced a stressful situation?
They say, with anesthetics, they say it's about 98% of the time it's monotonous. 2% of the time it is sheer terror.
Okay.
It's literally, I can't, it's piss your pants terror. So always, you say it's 98%. I say it's 98% monotony, but you're never really resting easy because always in the back of your head, it's like, what's the next thing to go? What's gonna happen? What could go wrong?
Yeah.
And what are my next 3 steps? What's my plan A, plan B, plan C?
Mm.
So you always have it. It's basically like similar to flying a plane. One of my instructors in Los Angeles was actually in his previous career. So he's an anesthesiologist now, but in his previous career, he was a jet fighter pilot.
Wow.
And he said one time he was taking off from an aircraft carrier. I think it was an F-14 Tomcat. They don't use those planes anymore. But one of the engines went out when he was taking off. And basically, he had to respond within milliseconds, or else he was going to dump it into the ocean. And at that speed, he'd be dead.
Yeah.
Right? So everyone asked him, how did you make that decision within milliseconds? Basically, you had to act really quickly, or else you're dead.
Yep.
He goes, I didn't make that decision then. I made that decision, years ago when I started my training. I know, okay, this happens.
What happens. Yep.
this is what I'm going to do. So
So
it's not a decision you make at that point. It's
So you already
something
have
you've
that
thought.
contingency
Exactly.
built in from,
It's
training.
there.
Yep.
It's there. Yeah. Ideally, that's what you have.
Okay. Wow. And I guess, have you ever had to go through your plan A's, B's and C's?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Periodically.
Yeah.
So I knock on wood, all my patients have been good, but absolutely, yeah. I think that's every few months. Look, to be honest, not even every few months, even just yesterday, patient has an unanticipated difficult airway. Basically, if you don't respond quickly, well, they're not breathing. Basically, they're not breathing, so you have to secure their airway and make sure they're breathing. You have basically a couple of minutes before. Not to scare any patients, but but basically you have minutes.
Yeah.
It's more
before the oxygen obviously runs out, right? Like so, and
Well,
that's when the
before-
damage starts to occur, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Before any permanent damage starts to occur.
Yeah.
It's not milliseconds like taking like a jet fighter, right? But it's minutes.
Yeah.
So it's not. But you don't.
Yeah, but when your heart's probably pumping,
Yeah. Well.
150 beats per second.
Yeah. So to be honest,
minute, I should say.
at that point, I was faced with that scenario yesterday,
Yep.
and it's not that big of a stress because you've made that decision years ago.
You've already got your plan in place.
You already have your plan. So it actually doesn't raise your heart rate that much.
Yep.
When I look back on it now, like the day after, I'm like, oh shit, that could have gone really
bad.
badly.
Yep.
But at the moment, you're actually perfect.
You're in the moment.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. You've been there before.
Yep.
You've done this. You've done this hundreds, if not thousands of times.
Yep.
So it actually doesn't raise your heart rate.
Isn't that funny? I find there's such a parallel. It's like, it's the anticipation of the storm versus being in the storm.
The storm.
When you're in the storm, you're in the storm. You can't change it,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
But it's that anticipation, that fear, that
the
anxiety.
worst.
That's what chews people up more than anything else.
Exactly.
You
But I think it's good because without that anticipation, there's no preparation, right? There's no, that's that pain you worry about. That's the drive, right? You don't want to go there.
Yep.
You don't want to go there. So what am I going to do to make sure that when I'm there, I know what to do?
Yep.
But in that moment, when you're in the storm, there's not really thought, right?
Yep.
There's just action, right? Before and after, like when I'm looking in retrospect, my heart rate's going up now. I'm like, oh, that could have been a career ender.
Yep.
But in the midst of it, I think if you've trained well enough, hopefully that it's just second nature.
One of the things I was just wanting to ask you about was, so with your sister in the Philippines, how often would you go back and visit her?
Look, it's hard with kids, as you know.
Of course, but like throughout your schooling, did you go and visit? Or?
So during my schooling, I think we went back just a few times, probably less than a handful, maybe 4 times, give or take. A large part of that was because there was no money to go back.
Yep. That's right. You're studying, right? So
studying. And we didn't have a lot of money. It was just my mother never made a lot of money.
What was she doing for?
She was doing medical admin stuff.
Okay.
So I think I remember her making in New Jersey in the 1980s, late 1980s. I think it was a big deal when she was getting $7 an hour or something like that.
Wow.
Right. So I think that was a big deal. And eventually she moved up to, $12 an hour.
Yeah.
And I know this is a long time ago, but
of course. Yeah.
That's
the rate, right? Like,
yeah.
Do you think that the trying to look after your sister was a strain for your parents?
Oh, look, obviously it would be. I think my father didn't do a great job of it
Yep.
because so my mother took me to the States and my father stayed in the Philippines.
Yep.
He didn't really do a great job of looking after her. I think it was mostly, like, luckily we had extended family there who would help,
Yep.
right? I think my mother would send back money occasionally, but she lived in my grandfather's house.
Yep.
And my father, I think he visited her. I mean, they were in the same country, maybe, a couple hours away at the most.
Wow.
And I think he visited her maybe just a handful of times as well.
Yep.
So
Sometimes I just wonder whether, if I put myself in his shoes, I think, it would be so painful to see that, if I was to, as a parent myself, and, if anything was like that was to happen to my kids, I just, I just think about the emotion
sure.
that I would go through, and like it makes me, sort of emotional thinking about it. Like,
Yeah.
so I just wonder, whether that, when something like that happens, and things take that kind of a turn for whatever reason, that, is there an element of blame? Is there,
That's a good question. Look, I'm sure, I don't know. It's hard to say. It's hard to, it's not something I really spoke to him about. I think largely because I was in my teens. It's not something I
we don't
thought
think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's the same.
In retrospect, I wish I could ask him that now.
Yeah.
I wish I had a podcast to listen to, even if I couldn't ask him, right?
Yeah.
But look, I think that would weigh heavily on any father, right?
Yep.
When the accident happened, my parents were actually away. I think at that point he was an Philippine ambassador to working for the Philippine embassy
Yep.
to Singapore, actually.
Wow. So he was probably away in Singapore.
He was in Singapore, I think, with my mother at that point.
Yep.
And they had to fly back.
Yeah. And yeah. So that's it. That's even harder again. You're not even there.
No. I think, look, I would feel a lot of guilt.
Yep.
I would feel a lot of guilt if I was in his shoes. I don't know how that affected him. I just, for me, I can just speak from my perspective. I don't know. It's hard. I think I would have done things differently.
Yep.
I would do things differently now if that happened to one of my kids.
Yep.
I would.
Yep.
It would still be quite traumatic, obviously.
Yep.
I can't even get my head around it, to be honest with you. But
Yep. Did you? And I guess so. Your relationship with your father. Did you, get to talk to him before? So he's passed away.
He passed away. I think when it was maybe about. It's actually a little bit before I met my wife. Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe a year or two before I met. So it's 16, 17 years now.
Yep. And what was your emotions like when that happened?
I don't know. That's the first time anyone ever asked me that question. Look, it was different, right? So I think I had a lot of anger towards him growing up. And if I'm honest, probably now. I think a large part of it's I think that one of the reasons why my parents split up was he wasn't faithful. And so I think there's that part of it. I did try to reach out to him a couple times, but I didn't get a great response, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
So I think he cared about me when I was, but I don't remember him that well. And to be perfectly, did it affect me? Probably subconsciously when he died, but I never really thought about it.
Yeah.
There's probably a big part of that that's still driving me to try to be successful now.
Yeah. Well, I think, as with anything, part of the reason why, I like having these conversations is because it allows us to process things that we wouldn't ever, like it challenges us to consider
absolutely.
things in a different way, right? And that's why, I always like to view it from another perspective, and because I had that same sort of emotion with my dad in terms of, not being, I guess I had a disdain for him, because of, what had gone on with my mum.
Yeah.
And, I just felt like, if you're the guy that's meant to be making amends, what sort of amends have you been making? Like I was very angry for a very long period of time. And I had I don't know what sort of changed. Like I can remember maybe I had a dream or something, and I can't really remember the specifics of the dream, but just one day I woke up and I decided, I can't forget like what's happened, but I can forgive, and just, and then I started to view it from a different perspective. I viewed it from the perspective of, okay, so, I was always, saying to my dad that he should do more, that he should, try harder and do those.
You said this in your dream?
No, this is how I process the emotion.
Oh,
right? So I would always, my thing with him would be like, because the times that, my mum has had to go into the hospital, I feel like it's always sort of relied on me to push that in my family. And, it's a lot of weight to bear, especially when,
you're supposed to be the kid.
Well,
I know you're not a kid,
yeah,
but still, that's
in one sense. But think of it from the emotional perspective of, let's say you think there's nothing wrong with you, and then one of your kids wants to put you in hospital, and you are adamant there's nothing wrong with you. Like, what sort of emotion are you processing towards your child? Right?
Yeah.
And that was the thing that was the heaviest weight on me.
Yeah.
Was, like I love my mum so much.
Sure.
Right. And that she might be thinking that I'm doing this out of hate or something like that.
Yeah.
When it's completely not the case.
Yeah.
Right. And so, when I was processing these sorts of thoughts and emotions to do with my dad, I started thinking, okay, because of the history, there is probably some parts that, he may not be able to do effectively. And so I sort of, I changed my tact with it, and I said, because I started doing a lot more research and, trying to understand it a lot more, and I would then suggest things to my dad and say, Dad, I think you should read something like this. Maybe that will help to give you some more insight. This is how my perspective on the situation, and can you maybe try and do something like different? Like try and approach it from a different angle, because I guess from a companionship perspective. I think they've sort of resigned themselves to the fact that they can still be companions to each other.
Sure.
Even
which is something.
Yeah, which is something, right?
Yeah.
Because, I don't see my parents as much as I should, because I'm so busy, and I still have the opportunity to do that. Hence, when I had that, when I like in the third podcast, I got to sit down with my dad and ask him all those questions. And there was I had a lot of misconceptions about what things were like, and I'm probably not game enough right now to sort of
ask the other questions.
Yeah, to have a confronting conversation. Like I can talk about it, with you, because it's not like I have him across the table.
No, exactly.
To sort of process some of those things. But yeah, like I always think about it. I try and consider things from the alternate perspectives, because how we feel about something is always framed from our perspective. So that's why I wonder when it, that's hence why I asked you, in terms of how did you process the emotion of your father, you know.
I don't process it. That's
We
a
avoid
secret. Well, you just suppress it and use it to drive you forward, I think.
Yeah.
Well, look, that's obviously, I'm joking because that's an unhealthy way to do
Yeah.
it. But I think that's the way I've done it.
Yeah. Look, and I think ultimately, you know, at some point, you know, you will think about it differently, you know, and the fact that, you know, as you said, you know, nobody's really ever asked you that before.
No.
It might, you know, I don't, you might even go back tonight and be lying in bed and go, shit, why did Johnny ask me that question? You know, like
maybe.
Now you're thinking about it, right? But you know, I don't do it from that perspective. But I'm just genuinely curious.
I know.
You know, because you know, like I think you know, when faced with mortality, you know, we all have to work out what is our process of dealing with that sort of emotion.
One thing I can tell you is I definitely, you know, you looked at you were asking me about role models, and there's some role models who you look at and you're like, that's what I don't want. I want to do the opposite.
Yep.
I think look, I try my best to be a good dad.
Yep.
To my 3 kids, and I think what drives that is I want all the things for my kids that my father didn't give me.
Yep.
Right. So I'm just doing the exact opposite, and I'm trying my best to do that. And if anything it's made me, I think, a better father to have a father that wasn't so good.
Do you think your kids recognize that?
Oh, look, they ask me. So they ask you, when your kids get older, they'll start asking you more about grandma, grandpa. I hope you're going to be ready for those questions. Maybe this podcast will help you process things.
Well, funnily enough, that's one of the reasons why I started, right? Like I was looking at my kids, and I was saying to Ange that, you know, sometimes it makes me, like, I never gave a shit until I turned 35.
Yeah.
And, you know, I was looking at my kids and I realized, you know, that there's a lot of things that are in me that are in them, you know, like, I just,
for better or worse.
Yeah,
I think.
like whether it's some of their mannerisms and how they do things. You know, Harley has like this impatience in life that, you know, I see, you know, is resonated probably from me. And, you know, Cadence has, you know, some sorts of mannerisms which are like me, you know, when she's voicing her frustrations and things like that. But, you know, it made me think, you know, well, where did I get some of these things from? Because, you know, there is definitely an aspect which is environment related, but I think there's definitely an aspect which is genetic.
Oh, 100%.
What is the term, epigenetics or something, you know?
So the genetics is the original DNA that you pass to them. Epigenetics is what happens after you've passed it to them. And environment has shaped their DNA in different ways. So that's my understanding of epigenetics.
But so do you, from a medical standpoint, right? Like the healthier the parent is, does that then translate to healthier children? Because would there be less genetic damage in terms of like telomeres?
So that's a good question. I think that there's some evidence. Obviously, the mother's health plays a huge role.
Yep.
And the father's health.
Yep.
This is prior to conception.
Yep.
Seems to there are now associations they can find that the health. I think it's cardiovascular exercise. I forget which type of, whether it's cardiovascular or anaerobic exercise in the mother and father. They've both been shown to lead to healthier offspring. So alcohol, they've looked at alcohol intake. I think that plays a role. Age of the parent, obviously. Age of the parent. You know, I know as people are having kids later in life, I think that's not a popular bit of information to bring up, but I think it's true, both for the males and the females. So obviously you've probably heard with the females, there's a
higher incidence
of trisomy 21, and for males as well, the older the father seems to be a higher incidence of Marfan syndrome.
What's that one?
Marfan syndrome is basically it's going to be an error with they get cardiac defects. They get
holes in the heart.
Yeah, they can get holes in the heart. They can get the aorta tends to be dilated in some of these patients. Look, so it can all play a role, and I think we're only understanding a very small part of it now. There's not heaps of research on it yet. I don't think there's. I think research tends to get driven by what makes money.
Yep, financial gain, right?
So pharmaceutical companies, if they're going to make any money from it, there's not much money to be made yet from looking at things like this.
Yep.
Looking at exercise. This is one of, I think, the failings of modern medicine. I think vaccines are great. I think that, hygiene is great. These are some of the things that make medicine amazing, that make it modern. But, things like exercise, things like sleep, there's not great research on this because there's no money to be made, as far as we can see yet, on prescribing exercise.
Sleep, yeah. Well, it's the unsexy thing. That's what it is, because there's a great book by a guy named Matthew Walker called Why We Sleep, and it's not a big book, but I think for me that was I heard about it on Joe Rogan's podcast, and he had Matt Walker on, and it was a great podcast, and it prompted me to then go and get a copy of his book and have a read. And then I was thinking back, and I go, shit, I've done some damage to myself with all the burning the candle at both ends for many years, and now I can't function without solid sleep. It's just become so impactful to leading a highly effective life. Like,
absolutely, there's no question.
So I think that's something that's really, really important, and we overlook how those things can impact our health and well-being, because when I look at I know one of the things for my mum is like when she's on the medication, she gets better sleep. She probably sleeps more, but at the same time, I think there's probably some benefits to that.
Absolutely, I think that especially for anyone, for everyone, sleep has benefits, but especially for those who have mental health issues. Look, I'm sure you notice if you get, for example, 2 hours less sleep a night, your temper is a little bit easier to flare up. You're not as focused with everything. I mean, I don't feel as happy, or if I don't get a good night's sleep.
Well, that was one of the things. I think I read it in that book, or it might have. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was in that book, and it was talking about how you got the different sleep stages, right? And so generally, when you first go to sleep, so if you go to sleep late, you might not get enough deep sleep, and deep sleep is your restorative sleep, so it allows your muscles to repair and repairing damage to the body. And then when you get to the morning, you generally find yourself getting more REM sleep. And that's where your brain is now processing memories, images, neural pathways, all that sort of stuff, to then allow your mind to be refreshed. So that's the sort of two sides of the coin, right? If you shorten sleep, you're either going to be sleeping later and sacrificing your deep sleep component, which then leads to probably physical health issues. Or if you're waking up early, you're probably sacrificing your REM sleep, and that's then impacting your mood, your ability to process, trauma or depression and those sorts of things. So, it sounds so unsexy to say, I sleep, 8-9 hours a night, because everybody is in this world where they want to gloat about saying, I only sleep 4 hours a night. Well, yeah, good on you. Let's see how are you playing the long game or the short game?
This is the thing that I think that affects.
We glorify it. We glorify, that it's great to sleep less.
The medical world, especially all your medical trainees, all your doctors, especially in the States, it was considered heroic to see. You're comparing how many hours you slept. People would go, easily 30 hours with no sleep, and they'd still be performing surgery.
And how, what mental capacity are you going to have to make an informed decision?
Absolutely not.
You're
not. There's going to be. Dealing with my emergency situation yesterday.
Yep.
Is it safer for the patient if I got 7 to 9 hours of sleep versus 4. I think it's going to, the answer is pretty clear, right?
Yeah. In the greater scheme of things, absolutely. Yeah. I think, probably 8 to 9 times out of 10, you're going to make a better decision.
Absolutely. No question. Yeah. No question. Even the training's great, but you need all of it. You need to be there 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to be focused.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to talk to you a little bit about kids. So obviously, you've got 3.
Yeah.
And I guess what did you find to be the differences between each one of them? So as an example, what I sort of think about is that, when Cadence came into the world, I had one specific sort of emotion. I had a very different emotion with Harley. I sort of spoke about it with Bo in the first podcast, where it's like, you feel a lot more relaxed with the second one. Did you have any sort of, I guess, what was the emotion that you sort of went through and processed?
Look, it's a constant state of processing it now. I love my kids, but I've just been getting to know them for the past, 13 years. I agree. I think that you're much more on edge with the first one.
Mm.
I feel like I'm completely unqualified to talk about this because I think with kids, it's still a constant learning process, and they continually pose new challenges to you, and you're like, oh, I've never thought about that. Oh, wait, it's. I think that if we just talk about challenges, I think that with my son, they're all different. I have one son and 2 daughters. They're aged now 13, 12, and 10, and they are so different. They're all raised in the same house, but I've got my son his name is Brendan. Today he was talking to me about black holes and the physics of black holes and stoicism, and he's reading me quotes he's got literally quotes all along. You know how normal kids have posters up on the wall. He does have some posters, but he's got like quotes he's handwritten.
Yep.
He looks like a crazy person.
Yep.
With Marcus Aurelius' quotes. He's got Stephen Hawking up on his desk. He's just an very odd, but what's the word? Constantly teaching me about things. And, we're actually, especially the past, year or so, I think we've grown closer together. But I find that I learn so much from each of them. My 12-year-old daughter, Alyssa, she probably acts older than she should. She's probably the most level-headed person in the family. That's including, if you compare her to my wife and myself, she's probably the most level-headed out of all of us. And I wish she would. I wish she wasn't so. I wish she would just let go a little bit. But she enjoys it. I think.
Yep.
The youngest one is a bit of a wildcat. She's got a kind heart, but she has this sense of humor. Basically, I don't know where she gets it from.
Yep.
Like my wife and I look, and she's almost stand-up comedy level.
Yep.
And it's. I feel like they're teaching us as much as we're teaching them.
Yeah.
It's different. I think with your kids, as your kids get older, I think my only advice to you is probably to enjoy it as much as you can, because I know they have genetics from you and your wife, but they are their own people, and they'll continue to grow as such. Obviously, with with your guidance. But God, it's an amazing journey. I mean, it's just enjoy it because time goes by so quick. Man.
Yeah, no, it does.
Really quick.
Yeah, I think every parent feels like that because I think there's two concepts of time I really like. Is that when you're young, I think everybody has those times when you're looking at the clock and you're going, oh, I wish time would go faster, right? And like whether you're at school and you're bored, like everybody has probably processed that kind of logical thinking. And then when you think about it, when you're as an example, if I use my daughter, she's 3.5. 1 year of her life is a third of her life, right? And then as we get older, our sense of time sort of melts away.
Yeah, it does.
Because 1 second starts to become less and less significant because we've lived longer.
It's a smaller percentage.
It's a smaller percentage of our life.
Know, yeah.
And then when you have children, they become your new yardstick for time, right? And to them, like they're probably still feeling this drawn out sense of time, but for us, it's just disappears.
I'm sorry. Is it school? I can't believe it's school holidays again. They're graduated from primary school. Oh, look, they've graduated from high school.
Yeah.
Oh, look, they're getting married.
Yeah.
I'm exaggerating a little bit.
Yeah.
But
it's the milestones, right?
It is those become your new milestones.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And then just talking about, I guess, you and Marini, so she moves to America.
Yes.
Not long after you decide we're going to get married.
Yeah. I didn't have. It was one of those things. I'm like, this is it. There's no. I didn't. It's almost as if we had those conversations. I didn't have any doubt really.
Yep.
I think that's not to say that we haven't had our differences. Anyone who's been in a relationship they've had arguments. Obviously, that's a given. But I knew from very early on that she was it, and maybe it's from learning from. I hate to say it's perhaps as I grew older, I realized what I didn't want in a partner. I knew enough at that point. So when I met her and got to know her, I'm like, okay, this is it. I didn't really have it wasn't even a choice, to be honest with you.
Yep.
This is it. There's no other choice.
Yep. And so at what point did you meet her parents?
Afterwards, look, I flew to Australia actually.
Yep.
And looking back on it now, I'm like, it's one of those things where exactly what you're talking about when you're in the storm, when things are happening, you're not really thinking about it. But when you look back on it now, I'm like, oh shit, what must they have been thinking? Like, who's this guy? Is he some sort of serial killer? Is he? It could be anyone.
They don't know you. Yeah.
But I flew to Australia to try to introduce myself. And look, I'm going to take your daughter away now, and she's going to move to a whole different country. And back then it's hard enough making long distance call, and somehow they saw it within themselves to trust me, and they believed who I said I was. And they saw that I loved their daughter, and I've tried my best to take good care of her and our family since then. I think perhaps they saw that I was honest. I hope that's. I think it's usually pretty easy to tell if someone's honest, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how they let me get away with their daughter.
So, and then. How did you guys then decide that, because you've taken her to the States, basically.
Yeah.
And she's living with you in the States.
Yes.
At what point do you then decide, stuff this, we're going to go back to Australia?
So that was, look, to be honest, there's a few things that led to that. Look, I think she and I always knew it's probably a better place to raise kids.
Yep.
The US is fun and it's great. It's not the ideal place to raise kids. I mean, just like I mentioned to you before, just 2 weeks ago, they had a few people died in a school shooting at the high school I graduated from. And I was talking to my son. I said, you could have easily been, so he's in high school now, you could have easily been at that high school, one of those kids.
Yep.
Right? That hit a little close to home, right? So we always knew we wanted to come back here to raise our kids. And I had a couple of anesthesiology consultants. One actually was from Royal Prince Alfred, and she helped introduce me to the anaesthetist here at Royal Prince Alfred, because that's where she trained. And I had another this guy who was a mentor of mine, Anthony Nyurgis, who lived here in Australia for some time, and he said, Mark, it's like, you married an Australian, good for you. You need to go to Australia. He's like, you need to get out of this hellhole.
Really?
Yes, he did. He knew, and I'll be honest with you, as a clinician, it's a much better place to be a doctor here than in the States. I think it's a little different if you wanted to do hardcore research. If you wanted to, I think a lot of the grants by basically by the CDC, there's a lot more money for research in the States. I think if I wanted to be a professor somewhere, the U.S. is the best place to do it. But if you wanted to be just a doctor and take care of patients, Australia is the best place to do it. No question. Lifestyle here is so much better. I don't have to work like a dog like I would be in the States. I mean, it's a much more balanced lifestyle.
Yep. So when you came over, so you were at Prince Alfred?
Yeah.
And so then what's the sort of process from there? Like, do you work in a hospital for?
So they asked me, because I was already, I took my boards, I was certified in the States. They basically asked me to do a couple of years of supervised training, so fellowship. Basically, I was working as a fellow / senior registrar, and then I had to take my fellowship exam, and that was it. And I thought it was fair. I thought it was pretty easy. I think, in fact, it probably made me a better anesthetist to do the exam again.
Yep.
Yeah. So it was good. It was. I'm brushing over a lot of the things because sometimes you tend to overlook the work you've done.
Yep.
I tend to just brush over these things. I think it was hard work. A lot of nights nights without sleep.
Yep.
But overall, I'm glad I did it.
Yeah. Well, 15 years of schooling.
15 years, yeah, that's a long time. I actually, to be honest with you, when I talk to my kids about careers, I sound like Cam, like the guy who talked, the resident who talks, the surgery resident who spoke to me. He said, like, yeah, I guess if you want to be a doctor, you can be. I would suggest that you don't be a doctor, but look, if you really want to be, you can.
Yep.
I wouldn't recommend it. If you love it, if you if you love the science, if you love the patients, you don't really have a choice.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't. It's not for everyone, that's for sure.
Yeah.
15 years is a long time, man.
Well, it's a big investment, right? Like, you don't want to come through that process and then realize, shit, I don't really want to be doing this. Right. After 15 years, I'm sure there are plenty out there that do.
There's the pressure from parents and relatives. I think for some people, like I had someone I was doing university with, and he was forced by his parents to try to be a doctor. He was pre-med. He was trying to get into medical school, and he would basically lie to his parents and go, look. He would take all the pre-med classes, organic chemistry, calculus, physics, all of it, and then on his off days, he would be doing all the engineering classes because he really wanted to be an engineer. He didn't want to be a doctor, but he's like, he had to go behind his parents' back. And there's nothing, I mean, it doesn't matter what you want. As long as you find what you want to do. I think he said, he would tell me that his parents would not be happy with him being an engineer for some reason. Yeah. But he had to go behind their backs, and he basically did 2 degrees at the same time.
I think he's lucky on 2 fronts, because I think he's also lucky that he actually found something that he was passionate about. Because I think that that's probably the biggest struggle is,
true.
A lot of people haven't really worked out what it is that they're trying to achieve.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I was having this conversation with one of my employees today, because we were talking about career planning and those sorts of things, and there's a saying that I really love this saying at the moment, and it's how you do anything is how you do everything, right? Because I have a sort of a slightly gross example, but my gross example would be like, and that means so when I go to the bathroom and I'm doing my business and I notice there's something on the floor that shouldn't be there, or like somebody's made a mess or whatever, I have to clean it, because there's
That's true.
And if I overlook that, then what else am I overlooking?
Exactly.
Right. So I sort of use that saying to hold myself accountable for a lot of the things I do, because if I want to be good at anything, then I need to be good at everything. Yeah. And so that's where I think we're in a different age now, where that old saying about jack of all trades, master of none, we can start to almost push that to the side, because what it's more about is how can you see the commonality in your ability to learn this particular task, and then apply that same ability to learn something different or new.
I think that willingness to go above and beyond translates across multiple skills, right?
Yeah.
Like both physical and academic, right? But finding your passion, I think that's a bit harder. Don't you think? I mean,
well, yeah, because people are only thinking about passions from a traditional perspective, that it's like this field or that field, but they're not really thinking about that there's the grey area between all of these different fields.
That's true.
Right?
That's true.
Hence why I run an automotive business, and then I started doing this podcast because I had some great conversations with people, and I wanted to share them. And then I teach I help to teach kung fu. I train jiu-jitsu. I do all sorts of different martial arts. I dabble in CrossFit. I do all these different things. But, I guess, I go into all of those things aiming to do it to the best of my ability, not to be the best, just to do it to the best of my ability.
Sure.
Right? Because how you do anything is how you do everything.
It's true.
So if that's the standard that I hold myself against, then, how I am as a leader and a manager, well, I don't want to be the best leader and manager. I just want to be the best leader or manager
You can be.
that I can be.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the standard that I sort of hold myself accountable to. And yeah, like, so, people would say, oh, but how do those things link to what you do for work? Right. And the link for me is that, when I've had to teach, kids or adults, martial arts, you have to learn how to communicate effectively. So I can take that little bit of communication skill and then apply that to my working environment. And then I go and take, my road to a sale, and then I go and apply that to life in terms of, relationships, right? So there's all this sort of commonality in the world that we isolate, and we don't view it as having that similarity. I focus more on trying to understand what are the similarities between all the things that I do, rather than what are the differences.
I think excellence is something that carries over to everything that you touch, right? The only problem I find with that is, And I'm thinking out loud because I look at my kids, and part of my goal as a father is I'm trying to help them find what they like to do, you know? And I find when it becomes a game, people will start excelling, right? But unfortunately, in our world as it is now, there are certain things that will attract monetary remuneration, right? Because look, it's not that you obviously don't need $1 million a year to be happy, obviously, right? But you do need some amount of money to keep the lights on, right? To buy the podcasting equipment.
Yep.
Do you think the money would just, I'm thinking out loud, do you think the money will just come eventually once you find?
Nowadays there's money in almost everything. You know, there's guys on Twitch that probably make a killing in terms of just streaming themselves playing games.
That was right? If you told someone that 20 years ago, they'd look at you like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Right.
I think as, you know, our world moves into this more automated phase, you know, of automation.
Yeah.
This is where artistry and creativity and communication skills will actually come to the forefront, because, you know, when we look at, you know, age-old professions, there's always been people that have been entertainers, you know, so from a communications perspective, like you've always had that requirement for people to be entertained. Then, you know, there's always been an element which is, even if we think about food as an example, you know, food, you know, if we go back, you know, in history, has been for existence. You know, you need food to survive. Yeah. Now that food has become more abundant, food has now become an art.
That's a good analogy, yeah. It's not just sustenance.
It becomes an art. It's become an experience.
Yeah.
Right? So likewise with cars, you know, before cars were just a form of transport. Yeah. Now it's actually, you know, it's an expression of you know, an expression of how you are transported, right? Yeah. So, you know, a lot of people spend more time in their cars, you know, sitting in traffic than
at home,
than at home, or, you know, like that becomes their office or their mobile office. So that's an important aspect for people to think about as well. But I think, you know, as our necessities sort of get taken care of, the ability to take that to the next level becomes more apparent, you know. So, you know, because we live in a first world country, you know, as I said, you know, food is taken for granted. So now we're not just looking for food for subsistence. We're looking at food to give us an experience. Likewise, you know, if our the roof over our heads is sort of taken for granted, now we want bigger and better places. You know what I mean? So it's just that it all sort of shifts as and translates more into this experience of about how does it make us feel, as opposed to how do we survive. You know, and I think, you know, and that, like, you know, going back to, you know, what we're talking about in terms of growing up, like, I think, you know, the fact that you had moved between places would have helped your maturity, would have helped to develop you as a person, because, you know, you're placed in uncomfortable situations where you've got to learn from that, and, you know, start to read people differently and understand that, you know, different people have different ways of expressing themselves. And that's a kind of like an emotional intelligence or coefficient that people don't, if you don't develop it or explore it, you won't develop it.
I think that, have you heard of that term? You've obviously heard of the IQ, intelligence quotient. Yeah. Have you heard about the term emotional intelligence and how that correlates with success afterwards, in your career?
I can sort of understand it, but yeah, no.
So I think that if I'm remembering the research correctly, I read this article about how IQ intelligence quotient is obviously important, but it's only important to the sense that you need to get your foot in the door, right? So if you want to go to, if your goals in life involve you going to Harvard or Oxford, these places obviously have a benchmark, right? And to get into that school, you need a certain score on your SAT or HSC, which to a large extent, is based upon your IQ, your IQ and your work ethic, right? So that gets you in the door. But your success afterwards, after you leave your formal education, is actually more related to your emotional intelligence than your IQ. And emotional intelligence will involve dealing with your dealings with people, organizational planning. It's sort of a broader range of how you deal with your customer, your boss, your team members. This is all emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
Right?
But these are the things that we don't teach.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Like,
I'm just speaking out loud again.
yeah. Because the majority of learning is based on academics.
Yeah. But can you teach emotional intelligence? I look just for my own. I never had any formal emotional intelligence training, but I spent a lot of time doing retail. I spent a lot of time doing sales. I spent a lot of time, with all people from all walks of life. I remember visiting I was dealing with in the morning I was dealing with college professors and trying to basically getting a research position in the lab, and later in the day I'd be visiting my cousin who was in the LA general population at the county jail. So I think being able to deal with people from multiple places in your socioeconomic scale, I think gives you a wider perspective of where people are coming from. And I think that's, I look at my own kids now and I think in fact sometimes when you try to keep kids safe, and I'm speaking to myself at this point, when you try to keep kids safe, you in fact shelter them and you shield them from other elements, which could help them grow actually as people.
Yeah.
It's hard as a parent, letting your...
Well, there's no corset. You conceive a baby and, 9 months later you have this baby. In that 9 months, like what sort of training have you undergone to become a parent, right? And so the only sort of learning that it really is on the job learning, right? Like you learn whilst you do. And then, if you don't have that ability to I guess, reassess, how you're doing some things and the result that you're getting, then, you'll never really understand why, your kids might have turned out the way they have. Like, I think there's always an element where, your kids are going to have their personality and they are going to be who they are. But there's always that, and this is another saying that I love about how are you complicit in what you receive, right? So, not to say that it's your responsibility or your accountability and it's 100% your fault or you're to blame 100% for whatever's happened, but you have a complicitness through either your action or your inaction as to what you get in life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And, and I laugh because, my son's, just over 1 and he wants to do everything that Cadence can do. And, so she's helping, Ange to cook things and do that. And he wants to do the same. And, he picks up things because he watches her and he sees that she can do it. And he has this impatience because he then grabs the stool and he'll want to do exactly the same thing. And it's funny when you see him wander around, he'll carry the stool, and then get behind the kitchen and start opening the drawers and start pulling out all the things. And then, obviously, we try and curb that because it's an annoyance, right? But on sometimes I think, provided he's safe and he's not touching knives and doing that sort of thing, maybe you just indulge him a little
let
and
him go.
Let him explore and let him learn. And, it's so hard to sort of work out, what is the right and wrong method to approach it.
Look, you're doing it in retrospect as well. It's hard when people are tired. Oh, there's another mess you have to clean up. I'm saying, like, it's in the moment, it's not always the easiest to deal with that situation, because ideally you let him explore. As long as he's safe, you let him explore.
Yeah.
But
where do you see, and then if you don't set the boundary, right, then you want to put in a boundary.
It doesn't work anymore.
Well, like, you can see we've got this play area. The door never shuts on the thing because, he doesn't like doors being closed. He likes, even though he may not.
So what's the boundary?
Well, like you got the
I know
this play area, and the door stays open because he can get himself out from the other side anyway. And then even if you block that off, he's learnt by watching his sister how to climb over the couch and climb over the boundary. So,
that's, I see what you mean. Yeah.
So, whereas for Cadence, I think, she didn't really have anyone, showing her the shortcuts of how to get around things. So she accepted those things a bit more, like she would stay in there. Of course, she'd get upset sometimes, but, she wouldn't really try and work out how to get around it. Whereas, I think he looks at her, and I think, I can see some parallels between myself and my brother. My brother was 7 years older than me, and I looked at him and looked at the things that he was doing. Complete disregard for a 7-year age gap. I just wanted to do whatever he was doing.
Exactly.
Yeah. Exactly. I never really thought about it. I just always thought that, whatever he can do, I should be able to do.
Sure.
So.
I wonder how much of that is personality based and how much of that is because you're the younger one. And there's probably some interaction between the two as well, right? I think, I don't know if anyone's got the right answer for where you set the boundary and how much you let them explore. That's a tough one, man. And you talk to 5 different people, they'll give you 5 different answers, I think.
Yep.
As long as they're safe and not playing with knives, I think you're good. I think that's probably good. And as long as they're not too traumatized from you setting boundaries, that's probably that's probably the edges, right?
Yeah, the opposite ends of the scale, right?
Like the imminent death,
versus
complete trauma. If you're instilling trauma into your child,
complete oppression.
Yes, exactly. That's so. I think anywhere in there in between, I think you're good, man.
Yeah.
You're good. I don't know if there's a right answer. I think I would recommend, though. I've read a couple of books recently by an Australian author, actually, Steve Biddulph. Have you heard of him?
No, I haven't.
It's really good, actually. I'm raising girls and raising boys. I'd recommend it. I'm a big audiobook, so I've listened to both the audiobooks. I don't have much time to pick up a book these days. I mostly read on my commutes.
Yep.
But I'd really recommend those books, honestly.
Okay. Yep.
I think you would really soak it up.
Okay. I'll check it out.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we've done over a couple of hours.
Yeah.
It's gone like that.
Yeah, I know. That was a pleasure. Thank you very much.
I really appreciate you coming on. I guess, if people want to find you, how would they contact you? If you need needles. Wait, that probably sounded wrong. if you need to be and what is it?
Anesthetized. Look, if you need to reach me, I'm on Instagram.
Yep.
At Off to Sleep Now. That's
That's legitimate.
Yeah, no, that's legitimate. It's Off to Sleep Now.
Oh, right. It actually, when I saw that username, I was processing and I was thinking, is that a jiu-jitsu reference, or is that actually legitimate?
It's a legitimate. Yeah, it's an anesthetist reference. Yeah, Off to Sleep Now.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right, that's it. Thank you, everyone.